Before we step into the frozen shadows of a trail long forgotten, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Forgotten Marsh. Here, we honor the silent stories, the ones carved into canyon walls and whispered through pine branches. If you believe that real history hides in the snow drifts and dust, you're in the right place. Prologue. Whispers beneath the Misospi. The winter of 1841. Tensions in the American Southwest were simmering like a pot left too long on the fire. The U.S. Army, still tentative in its hold over the New Mexico territory, faced a problem. Few back east understood. There were too many blind spots, empty canyons, unmapped routes, rumors of hostile raiders, and whispers of lost Spanish silver trails. The Army's supply lines were stretched thin, and any attempt to navigate the land without guidance often ended in disappearance or worse. Maps were inaccurate. Local allies were few. In Washington, thousands of miles away, had no idea how fragile the military's position truly was. In December of that year, a small reconnaissance unit and a weather-beaten lieutenant was dispatched from Fort Union under explicit orders to map a stretch of territory west of the Canadian River, somewhere near a place the locals called Cañon Largo. Their objective: locate a viable winter supply route through the canyons and back toward the Rio Puerco. It was a straightforward mission, but nature and time had other plans. They were not to blaze a trail, but to be swallowed by one. Ice without warning left the fort under a gray sky on December 3rd. Snow had not yet fallen, but the air was brittle. Lieutenant Asa Cumberland, the commanding officer, had a peculiar reputation, young, but with a scholarly demeanor that made him appear older. A lover of cartography and poetry, he had volunteered for the mission, believing it to be a fine opportunity for the disciplined mind. He had studied under some of the finest instructors in engineering and field logistics, but the frontier had its own curriculum, unforgiving, illogical, and driven by wind. Among his party were Corporal Elijah Mern, a former farmer from Kentucky with hands like knotty pine; Scott Felix Trujillo, born of Pueblo and Apache lineage, who claimed to know trails older than the names on maps; and Private Benjamin Lear, a drummer turned infantryman who had a tendency to write letters to no one in particular. Each man had his own reason for marching into the unknown. Mern was fleeing debts. Trujillo sought a vision he'd once glimpsed in childhood. Lear had lost his brother in a canyon not far from this one. At first, the land gave no trouble. They passed dry creeks and juniper groves, navigating using stars and stories, but by the sixth night, winter's hand descended in full. A squall swept from the Sangre de Cristos and caught them in open terrain. Horses froze. Canteens shattered. Trujillo called it a ghost wind, the kind that tore the spirits from men in their sleep. They sheltered near an outcrop and buried their tents in snow. Cumberland, in his journal, wrote, "The silence here is surgical. It cuts thoughts from breath. The cold is not merely temperature, it is judgment." They lost 2 mules that night, and yet, when dawn came, they pressed on, driven not by confidence, but by necessity. The ground behind them had vanished into storm. The path through Cañon Largo was not a single gorge, but a twisting complex of dry washes, steep ravines, and sudden openings. Once inside it, the wind stopped, but so did the sun. The cliffs were too high. Light only entered briefly each day, and it left quickly. Shadows ruled the floor. The air grew still. Some said it smelled of iron, others of something older. Trujillo led them through on instinct. He said he remembered a trail from his grandfather, a place called Pedra de las Voces, Stone of Voices. Whether it was a real landmark or just a name passed down, they never discovered. Instead, they found blackened stones, scorched trees, and a cave where something had long since been buried. A collapsed altar, an old fire pit. No one knew. Leah swore he heard whispers at night. Mern dismissed it. Too much cold gets into the bones, starts making its own voices. But the whispering didn't stop. Some began sleeping in shifts, keeping watch for things they couldn't name. Their maps were useless. Cumberland, Everett the analyst, kept drawing. His hands cracked from cold. He made a practice of waking early to sketch the cliffs while the frost was fresh. His journal entries grew shorter. On December 13th, he wrote, "We have made progress, but not in the direction I intended. If we vanish here, it will be into silence, not drama." They came upon a pool frozen solid. Trujillo insisted they break the ice and look underneath. They found a carved stone, submerged in mud. Spanish, perhaps? Illegible. Lear copied the symbols and swore they matched something he'd seen in an old Bible. The broken fire line. On December 16th, tragedy struck. A fire broke out in the center of the night. Some say sparked by a rifle left too close to the coals. Others whispered it was deliberate. Tents burned. A young soldier, Private James Holler, suffered burns on half his body and died 2 days later. His was the first death. Food began to run short. They turned to boiled pine bark and what little game Trujillo could find. They roasted a lizard. Cumberland refused to eat it. He began to withdraw, spending hours studying the cliff walls. He believed they were being guided, or perhaps warned. One night, Myrn found him carving something into the sandstone, a series of circles and lines. "It's a calendar," Cumberland said. "Or a clock. Or maybe a map. Time changes shape in here. Discipline, frayed." One man tried to desert but was found hours later, eyes frozen open, mouth full of snow. Lear stopped writing letters. Instead, he began copying the stones. The long climb by Christmas Eve. They had been in the canyon nearly 3 weeks. The men no longer spoke of finding a route. Now they spoke only of finding a way out. The canyon was a maze with no exit. Trujillo suggested a new plan. Climb eastward through a side gorge he had once used as a boy. Steep, but passable. They left gear, behind rifles, crates, even journals. Lear begged Cumberland to keep the journal, even if it meant they both died. The climb took 2 days. Ice clung to every surface. Ropes frayed. One man fell. Another lost 2 fingers to frostbite. But on the morning of December 27th, they reached a ledge and saw open land, dry mesas, distant cottonwoods. They had made it. A trail never marked, they followed a trickling stream east, sleeping in caves and under ledges. The wind returned, but the sun came to. They reached Fort Union on January 2nd, 1842. 4 men had died. 8 were severely Cumberland's eyes were inflamed, his maps half ruined. He submitted no full report, but his journal rescued by Lear contained sketches of the canyon, notes about wind patterns, landmarks, and a final entry. Cañon Largo will not be remembered. That is its nature. But for a moment, we lived inside the stone's breath. That is enough. Today, Cañon Largo lies mostly within private land. No markers indicate what happened there. No signs tell the story. But in a museum vault in Santa Fe, the journal of Asa Cumberland remains weather-worn, half-burned, but legible. A young boy on a school tour once asked why the drawings had no labels. The curator smiled and said, "Because some trails are meant to be found only once." If this quiet march moved you, give this video a like and subscribe to Forgotten March. Share this journey with someone who still believes there's history hidden in frost and silence. And tell us, which forgotten trail should we follow next?